We're up. This is the Hour Town with Troy By, and this is going to be a fun episode, even though I called him Brett coming in, and I've called him Brent correctly every other time. My older brother's name is Brent.
Yeah.
He actually just turned 50 the other day. It was crazy.
Wow,
You see your siblings hit
Yeah.
these milestones. But Brent Yonk is here.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I've had a few guests who are retired
FBI, yeah.
FBI, special agents, whatever, and doing various things, but...
Yeah. Good folks.
For a lot of reasons, I appreciate you coming in. You're an active FBI employee, and I guess we might just go ahead and say, listen, in no way are we going to have Brent talk about anything he shouldn't talk about.
Yep.
It's not the purpose of this show.
Yeah.
But I think it is going to be informative for viewers, and particularly those who might be interested in a career in the FBI.
Absolutely.
And, we're going to touch on a lot of things, but this is why... in part, I'm excited to talk to you on a few levels.
Yeah.
And one of them is, I've been excited to meet you. I appreciated you when you commented once on LinkedIn with something I think I had talked about going running and listening to something. And
yes, yeah.
Actually, I was able to work out in my garage this morning, but I always like to choose trying to do something physical.
Absolutely.
Kind of at the last minute just to gather my thoughts, and ideas will come to me, right?
Yeah.
But I really like what you're doing and your social media presence, right? Your branding that you're doing for yourself. And we're going to talk about that today. Yeah. But I think the reason it's important and I really like about the Bureau, I have a cousin who's a special agent. Mm-hmm. I actually took him. Before we hit record, we were talking about my prior live streaming, calling high school games. And he came up, he was going through the academy when I had just started.
Yeah.
And I asked him, I guess he came and spent Christmas with us. Uh-huh. He got a day off or whatever.
Yeah, some leave then.
But there was another time he had some leave, and it just happened to fall on a Friday night. And I was like, hey, Kyle, can you help me do this game? And it turned out being a freezing cold night, and the wind was blustery. Yeah. And I mean, it was absolute torture. Yeah. And I felt bad that I had him come and help out, but he was a good soldier. Yep. But I had took him, dropped him off at Quantico. And all of that. And the thing is, he was an accountant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had been an accountant for 8 years, worked at Price Waterhouse and different things. So the one thing I really like about the Bureau, as compared to other government agencies, is there's that kind of requirement to do something before you apply. Yeah. They don't want to take you as a 22-year-old graduate or a 24-year-old graduate even probably, right, from a bachelor's and a master's. They want you to go out and do different experience so that... And we're going to get into talking all about leadership and management today, so that I think you get the best talent that has had some tried and true experiences out in industry. Yeah, true.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a 3-year professional experience requirement for those applying to a special agent position, and that can come from a variety of backgrounds. I think what most people kind of misunderstand about our agents is they think, well, you have to have been a cop or you have to have been in the military, and the reality is, a lot of our special agents, we pull them from a variety of disciplines, and so you could have been a tech guy. You could have been doing tech for 3 years, and we need that in the special agent cadres because we need special agents who understand how data and how information, can be utilized and support the investigations that we're doing. So whether you did accounting, you were in IT, you were in sales, we're not so much concerned about what that previous background was, but we do want to see that you did something, you applied yourself, and we really kind of we get that as you go through that interview process, as we're asking you about your experiences. We're trying to see okay, did you take initiative in those roles? Mm-hmm. Did you really apply yourself? Did you look for opportunities to have an impact and to make that more effective or whatever it was you were doing? And so, yeah, those are all things that we're gauging as we're interviewing people for those agent positions.
Now, what about non-agent route?
Yeah, so, one of the things I think most people probably are surprised about is the majority of people in the FBI are not special agents, right? So we've got about 12,000 of our population that are special agents. The other 24,000-ish, they're not. So we have a combination of intelligence-related positions, and then we've got a variety of professional staff positions, and those rank everything from our financial folks, our IT folks, our human resources folks. And so, it takes a lot of work to make sure that our agents have all of the tools and the resources and the planning and the analysis necessary to be successful in their jobs. So.
Right. And what's your career track? As like, I guess it's kind of a career service that you belong to, or you were hired into.
So it's, on the professional staff side for the FBI, it's a little different than the special agents. The special agents have a very curated, career track that they go through as they're going through the organization. For our intelligence folks, they've also got somewhat of a stable career track. Our professional staff, it can vary.
Really?
And sometimes I joke with people, it's almost like a choose your own adventure type story, because so when I came into the Bureau, I started as a GS7. Now, so I had worked in the private sector for about 10 years before I joined. And so it was an interesting departure to come into the FBI. And they brought me in because of my professional background. So I had spent most of my time in the private sector doing workforce development and change management. Mm-hmm. And those were both skills that this particular group that reached out to me in the Bureau wanted. However, when it comes to assessing where you're going to fall on the GS scale, the way that our human resources department functions is they take a look at the experience, they take a look at the position that you're trying to be put into, and they're saying, okay, do you have background from before that matches up with that? The particular position I came into in the FBI was a security specialist role. I'd never done anything security related in the private sector, but that's not why they were hiring me. They wanted me to fill this role and bring my workforce development. But HR, that wasn't part of their arithmetic, as it were. So I basically got graded as the lowest level with, coming in as a professional staff, which is a GS7 position. So that was a bit of a challenge. Just, it was a pretty drastic pay cut coming from private sector into the government. But once you get in and if you've got that initiative and if you've got that kind of collaborative relationship building ability, like the sky's kind of the limit. And so once I got into the Bureau, I really started kind of networking and figuring out what does the internal mechanisms of the Bureau really look like? How does the culture work? How do the people work? And so I was able to kind of pivot and really kind of have a very interesting and dynamic career thus far.
Yeah. And I guess I apologize. I always assume when I hear things that even if I know you weren't a special agent, in my mind, I make these assumptions like, oh, that's the same requirement.
Yeah.
So let me rephrase that by saying a mid-career hire, though. And I've seen a lot of great mid-career hires. That's what they called them in the Intel community I supported. Mm-hmm. And those were always a special breed. And you can kind of tell those who didn't have any real experience. They just, maybe they were summer interns, they get a full-time job to get their clearance, and then they start.
Yeah.
But there was something different when someone brings different ideas and different perspectives, and
absolutely
from the private sector. You were just in AFROTECH in San Antonio, right?
I was in Austin. Yeah.
Oh, in Austin. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so AFROTECH is one of the largest technology conferences specifically focused at the African American community. And so the FBI has been putting a really heavy emphasis on the importance of diversity and inclusion for our organization. Mm-hmm. I think Director Comey, he was kind of the first to really start banging the drum. And one of the things that he would frequently say is, like, we have to reflect the communities that we serve if we're going to be effective. And so from that time and continuing through Director Ray's tenure as the director, we've really been pushing hard to ensure that as we're going about recruiting and as we're looking for that talent to bring into the organization, that we're looking across all of those communities, including the minority and the underserved communities. And so AFROTECH is a great opportunity for us to be able to get out amongst that community and to be able to, one, gauge and see what the tech talent is over there, which is incredible, but also to be able to help bridge the gap for that community to really see themselves being part of the FBI. Mm-hmm. And so over the course of the 5 days that I was there, I had multiple conversations with people that usually would start with something along the lines of, I don't know if I'm the type of person the FBI is looking for. And, I'd hear those and I'd be like, oh, okay, let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? Why do you think that? Mm-hmm. And as we would go through the conversation, and they would say things along the lines of, well, I don't know if I'd fit in with the FBI, or am I the type of person that would fit in with the broader culture of the organization? And we'd talk about the need for us to be diverse and to be, having that broad background, not just from a racial perspective, but from location and background and an experience level. Mm-hmm. And you would watch over the course of the conversation as people would start to, like, recognize there might be an opportunity for me here to bring my skills and my experience. And it was probably the most gratifying element of being part of that recruiting team, was just to watch so many people start to really think and be like, okay, maybe I can be a member of the FBI.
Yeah.
It was also interesting. This was one of the first, if not the first time, where we were actually able to do on the spot interviews and conditional job offers to people. And so we would pre-screen their resumes and make sure that they met all the minimum qualifications. And then we would sit them down with some of our technical recruiters and actually give them on the spot interviews. And we would assess their coding abilities and their technical background. And if they fit with one of our current job openings, then we could issue them a conditional job offer that basically says, if you're able to pass the background investigation, like, you're in. And so I think that was something that really made an impact. And I think a lot of people were surprised to see that. I mean, we're there with major companies like Apple, Tesla, and Nintendo, like these industry titan, organizations in the private sector, and none of them were really doing that. There were a couple of others that were doing interviews and such, but it was really cool. And it was fun walking the expo floor. So we were on the 4th floor. We had our own little private room so that we could spend more quality time with people that came in. But it was fun walking the expo floor and hearing people from like JP Morgan Chase or from LinkedIn or from these other companies. And they're like, yeah, we hear the FBI's here. Sounds like you guys are like making an impact. And so, you're doing something right when you've got private sector companies talking about you.
Yeah. Did you notice some people kind of milling about and hesitating on approaching you?
100%.
And then you like call them over?
Absolutely. So both when I was just walking through the hallway. So one of the things that we did to kind of help ourselves stand out was our HR team. They gave us FBI branded apparel. And so it was kind of like it had fun little technical designs and schematics and stuff, but it was all branded with like FBI jobs. And so you would, and then of course we had banners and stuff outside of our room. And so, yeah, you'd see plenty of people that they'd kind of look and they'd do a little double take and they'd kind of hesitate. They're like, why is the FBI here? Do I go take a look and see what's going on over there?
Are they watching me?
Yeah, exactly. And so we had some people sitting at a table at the front of the room. And so they'd see these people kind of standing off, just looking for like 10, 15 seconds. And so they'd wave them over like, yeah, come in, come talk to us.
Yeah.
And so we'd created a really inviting space for them to come into. We had some couches and stuff set up, and then we had some demos that they could actually watch and see real interactive, examples of some of the investigative work that we do.
So this executive order just came out on AI.
Yep.
And I'm thinking about, I want to relate this to this kind of you standing out amongst these other titans, if you will, in the industry.
Yeah.
And I know that one of the there's several different areas of this executive order.
Yep.
Make more tools, have us be more, put more time and energy into AI.
Yep.
Have people who create them, they have to have someone kind of check their code, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But then there's also, they've created AI.gov and they want to hire AI professionals, right?
Yep.
And I saw the same thing in the time I spent in the Intel community, where sometimes it's hard how do you recruit those best of the best and to come into public service?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure you saw it at AFROTECH,
yep.
and maybe it just comes down to like whether that's compensation or I want to work remote. I don't want to come into the office.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that your challenge is the same as the AI world is going to have this AI.gov. I mean, it's AI. You're thinking Silicon Valley. Why wouldn't you just work it out in Silicon Valley?
Sure.
Can you talk about that a little bit more too, of the stuff that you heard from people, and maybe a little bit more about just these kind of getting over that hurdle of maybe I could work in the public sector?
Yeah, 100%. So one of the positions I had prior to my current role, and so my current role, I am an assistant section chief in the FBI's Counterterrorism division.
Right.
And so the section that I oversee is called the Technology and Data Innovation section. And so our section is really responsible for interfacing with our special agents and our intelligence analysts that are doing counterterrorism investigations around the world. And our goal is to understand, what are the challenges that they're experiencing when it comes to receiving data, receiving information, and you being able to use that information to support moving their investigative efforts forward. And so my team will sit down with them. We'll try to understand, okay, what are those challenges? What are the requirements that we can mine from that information? And what are the then applications or tools or services that we can develop to help address some of those pain points? So artificial intelligence has long been one of these areas that we have been very interested in because of all of the, opportunities for efficiencies and, helping streamline a lot of the very manual efforts that go on when it comes to like intelligence and analytics, and something as simple as just taking data and then reformatting it into something that you could use to search through your systems can be very, very manually intensive. And so these emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, they can really bridge a critical gap and make our investigations move much faster.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge, of course, is everything that the FBI does has to pass the sniff test when it comes to the legal system. And so we're always looking at making sure that however we get the information that we get, or however we do our analysis of that information, we have to be able to explain that in a court of law.
Yeah.
And so especially when you're talking about artificial intelligence, the concern there is, well, if you're just putting an input into this black box and then you're getting an output out, how do you explain what happened? So that transparency, and I think that's part of the Biden administration's thing is, we have to be very logical, very intentional about the way we're designing these tools so that we can have that explainability, so that when we sit down in front of a jury, we can explain exactly how that artificial intelligence tool connected all of these dots to get the output that it did.
Is that chain of custody in another way of describing that in a way, or just the...
I think it's an element of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so chain of custody is obviously super important for our investigative efforts and making sure that we can account for any type of investigative material that we've got from the point we get it all the way through to processing. But yeah, and so when you talk about, especially the recruiting angle for artificial intelligence and machine learning and these other emerging technology skills, these are highly coveted skills in the private sector, which generally means they're going to drive the salaries and the benefits that are being offered to these individuals. So from a government perspective, right now we are generally limited to the GS pay scale that OPM puts out. And so that comes with very structured, standardized pay plans. Now, on the benefits side, the FBI has absolutely been working hard to make sure that we're offering a very well-rounded benefits package to all of our employees. Just this past June, we just added a new benefit that all of our employees get 3 hours of paid time every week to devote towards a wellness activity. It could be working out at the gym, could be doing meditation, anything along those lines. And so that's something that even in the private sector, is rare to see, and so that's kind of an exciting benefit that we have to offer. And we've got a whole slew of other benefits that we offer, and we try to spend time, especially at conferences like AFROTECH, to really help people understand, like, while your pay may not be directly comparable to what the private sector offers, there's all these other benefits that you get, including things like a pension, that the private sector doesn't offer anymore. And so when you look at it in totality, we're actually much more competitive than I think most people think we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, we're looking for these individuals, and the thing that you have to make sure to kind of explain to these folks is like, hey, you're coming into a government organization, and there is going to be a little bit of that bureaucracy that you've got to learn to deal with.
Yeah.
So in the private sector, it's like fail fast, and break things and learn and grow. Where on our side, we absolutely want to evolve, and we want to apply many of those principles of agile development, but we've got to be able to do it in a way that doesn't put at risk our investigative efforts, and it doesn't put at risk, the American people's safety. So
you made me think of something. Gosh, it's been like 15 years ago or so. Mm-hmm. I was talking to a guy that he's like a headhunter. He helps companies. Primarily, he's placing like executives, C-suite executives, but at the time he was kind of building up to that. And I was talking to him, and I was, I guess, frustrated with my job. And it was literally like, it was July 5th. And so, and I was like interested in getting out of the DC area. Mm-hmm. And he's listening to me and just kind of getting my requirements, if you will.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, Troy, actually think you got it pretty good, man. He's like, let me ask you a question. What'd you do yesterday? Well, he goes, walk me through the whole day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, we had like a pancake breakfast at church. And then, I don't know, I went to the pool and then I did this and I did that. We did fireworks. He's like, okay. He's like, every job I'm interviewing or placing for, they all worked yesterday.
Yeah.
Most of the day. They're on their phone constantly. So just step back and think about quality of life.
Yes.
And when I was a program manager, I would use that a lot. I was like, oh, you want to go work for Amazon? Great. Well, tell you what, you're going to get salaried and you're still going to work 50 to 60 hours a week. You're going to carry your computer everywhere you go.
Yep.
Now, when you come work here in the skiff, you can't take your work home. And we actually prefer you keep it around 40 hours a week.
Yep.
So, and if you decide to work more, we'll pay you for every hour. It's the kind of contract we're on. And I would say at the end of the year, you're probably going to see you're going to be that far off.
Yeah.
Or you can go do that, and that's fine. And actually, a lot of these places, they don't really want you to leave. They want you to be so comfortable at work that, you work as the primary objective of your life. But your call.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the FBI has really spent a lot of time over the last couple of decades really kind of ironing out that kind of work-life balance element for our folks. In the past, post 9/11, for that period, it was really kind of like all hands on deck. If you've got to work 24/7, you work 24/7. You bleed red, blue, white, and blue for the mission. But we've recognized over that period of time, just as much of the private sector is now recognizing post-COVID, that does take a toll on your employees. And so ultimately, it's in the best interest of the organization to ensure that its people are taking care of themselves in all elements. And so we offer resources like our employee assistance programs to ensure that people have the wellness programs from a mental health standpoint, from a financial health standpoint, because all of those elements, like if you don't have all those in check, like it's going to add stressors to your life that ultimately are going to be detrimental to your performance on the job.
Yeah.
And so we've really made sure to emphasize and put an effort to try to help our employees balance that as best as we can.
Do you represent the bureaus? I'm going to assume there are like a lot that are kind of attached to the intelligence community where a lot of times you didn't hear much. It was hard to figure out, hey, what's a career like at the FBI or, pick an agency.
Sure.
Are you, and it's good. I think this is fantastic for people. Again, we're not getting into anything we shouldn't get into. We're not going to talk about cases and things, but I think a lot of times people shy away because they're afraid. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
You just don't know what to expect. Yeah.
And I think are you just kind of in your role, given that license to kind of, yes, you may not speak, well, you speak on behalf of the Bureau, you know what swim lane to stay in.
Sure.
But is that something that they have been trying hard to do more sharing with the general public?
100%. Yeah. So,
and kind of when did that start?
Yeah. So there was a period, it was probably 2017-ish timeframe. There was a period where, we used to post all of our jobs out on USA Jobs, as most government agencies do. And we started to recognize like, hey, we're not getting both the quality and the quantity of applicants that we really want. And also we're not hitting those diverse communities the way that we want, right? We're just kind of getting the groups from the typical space. And so there was a real effort to kind of refine the way that we go about talking about work at the FBI. And so a couple of outputs that came from that, we have our FBI Jobs website that has come out. And so we put a lot of effort into ensuring that the brand of FBI, it resonates with people and helping them really understand, what does that mean? What does it mean to work at the FBI? What are the expectations of the FBI? And so we're really just trying to be more transparent about that. Again, we don't have to talk about the casework. We don't have to get into the specifics or the details, but we can absolutely talk about, who do we look for and what are the qualities of character that we look for in people to join the FBI, and helping people understand that and helping them recognize like this is what it is to like a day in the life of an FBI special agent versus a professional staff member versus an intelligence analyst. It really helps frame, kind of people's understanding of what that looks like. And it helps close that gap of like, oh, it's the FBI. Like, I don't know if I could work for the FBI. And then recognize like, oh, no, they are looking for people like me. They're looking for people with my background and experiences. And this is something that I can do to serve my country and to protect my communities.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's been a lot of intentional effort there.
And I I like it. You're big into, as you said, the time you spent in your career before joining the Bureau with change management, organizational behavior,
Yep.
if you will, leadership, all these principles. And it's nice to see you on LinkedIn, even though you're a Bureau employee.
Yeah.
But it's very much what, as far as who you follow and, who are people that we choose to emulate or we get our inspiration from, like the Simon Sinek's and others, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's nice to say, hey, it's cool. It's, Brent is allowed and licensed, if you will, by the Bureau to be forthcoming and share his thoughts on leadership on social media.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, for a lot of our folks, it can be a little challenging. When I first joined the FBI in 2015, there was this just common sentiment like, don't talk about where you work, don't really get on social media. But again, we recognize that if we continue to function in that very secretive way, it's just going to continue to amplify,
right,
especially to these other communities, that it's like, this is a place that isn't accessible to me.
Yeah.
And so by being able to be more forthright, by being able to be a little bit more visible in the community, we're able to ensure that people across the spectrum can see themselves as being able to join.
It was one of the biggest turnoffs when I did a lot of interviewing, and over like 20 years of that agency, like I knew where if a contractor came in, for the most part, I knew the nature of the work they were doing wherever they were working. And it was always funny to me when you would ask someone, so give me an idea what you do. Like, oh, I can't really talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I know what you do.
Right.
And you can absolutely talk about it.
Yeah.
There might be 2% of your job that you should be careful.
Yeah.
But you're a help desk person or something. Like, get over your, like, get out of here. Don't use the secrecy that I'm going to be like, whoa,
Yeah. Especially in DC, like it's pretty funny. There's the whole just like process that people go through. Well, so where do you work? I work in the federal government. Okay. Where in the federal government? I work for the Department of Justice. Oh, so you work at DOJ? Well, not DOJ, but so who do you work for then? Well, I work for the FBI. Oh, okay. So you actually work for the FBI. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it's the same thing. It's like there's nothing secretive about where I work. Now, we do have positions, absolutely, that, hey, if you're going to be an undercover operative,
sure,
things of that nature, like, yeah, you're not going to be out and about. You're not going to be on social media talking about what you do.
Yeah.
But that is a very minority group within the organization, and especially on the administrative side of the house with our professional staff members, we do work like everybody else in the private sector.
Yeah.
We do financial work. We do IT work. And that work is essential to making sure that the broader FBI can accomplish its mission.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about the big news of that you posted of the headquarters.
Yeah.
Not moving to, and I found it interesting because so the FBI headquarters, the new headquarters, is going to be built in Greenbelt, Maryland.
That was the announcement GSA put out yesterday, yes.
The other considerations were Springfield
and Landover. Yep.
Which is where, if you were a Washington Wizards fan, long before the Wizards, there were the Bullets, and they played in Landover.
Yes.
And I think the Magic Johnson has movie theaters there now.
Yeah.
That sit there
in that area.
In what was called the Capitol Center.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I remember hearing people think, oh, I think Huntsville might get the FBI headquarters. I'm like, what?
So yeah, so that came about just from one of the congressmen put out the idea. I think it was Jim Jordan.
Oh, really?
Just threw out the idea of, the FBI has not been able to lock down a new headquarters in D.C. Why don't we just put it down there in Huntsville where they're building all the other stuff?
Oh, okay.
I think it was more of just a
tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, tongue-in-cheek thing, more just trying to score political points than reality. But yeah, that it was out there for a hot second, and people were they were like, wait, is this like a Space Command thing? Is FBI thinking of moving something down here? But no, Huntsville was never something that was considered major consideration for the new headquarters.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these are the original 3 sites that we were looking at back in 2015 when I was on the new headquarters project, and It was a surprise. It was a surprise for pretty much all of us. We'd heard that the site selection was kind of being assessed, but yeah, the announcement of it, there was really no forewarning on the FBI side, so everybody was just kind of like, "Oh, well, okay, Greenbelt."
And this was yesterday, right?
This was yesterday evening. Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean that comes with some. There's going to be some interesting conversations over the next week and beyond. Within the FBI. Obviously, the FBI footprint from the employee standpoint is spread across the entire national capital region.
Sure.
And so you've got people that were as far south or further south than even I was in Northern Virginia. I lived in Stafford while I was working in D.C. And then you've got people that are far north in Maryland. And so obviously the challenge, and this was the same challenge we were experiencing during the original new headquarters project, was any move that we make is going to be detrimental to roughly half of the current FBI population in the area. And so how do you mitigate that to an extent, and what can you do to try to ensure that whichever direction we go is equitable as possible for the existing population?
Yeah.
So It'll be interesting to see, and as with most things, this is something that GSA announced it. There's still a whole bunch that has to go into actually actioning it, and there's still probably going to be plenty of inquiries into how was the decision made. I'm sure Congress will probably have some hearings related to this, so it's still early days in that process, and that's even before we start getting into the design of the actual. Whether it's a building or I think in the release they talked about a campus, but yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see how this progresses over the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly interesting on the heels of not FBI related, but the whole Space Command, and that's tied up in. Wait a minute, Colorado was number 4 on the list, and somehow they're keeping it there, right? And so there's just all this stuff going on with the outgoing general. He's supposed to retire, and he bought a farm nearby, whatever. But
yeah, there's a lot of factors that are probably going to have to be assessed in that overall decision.
Well, what's interesting about it, I mean, Huntsville, I learned through, I think you may know, I don't know if you know Ethan Woodruff. He's heading up they're trying to build a zoo. Mm-hmm. And when I interviewed him,
here in Huntsville, right?
Yeah. He brought in a whole slide presentation, and I was like, I don't think I can do 130 slides, but there's some really good information.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that keeps sticking in my mind is that we're like the 110th largest city in the country.
Yeah.
So we're secondary market.
Yeah.
But when it comes to why did they choose Greenbelt? Well, the metro is like a huge thing. Metro, train, depending on where you live, the subway,
public transportation.
The public transportation that goes out to Greenbelt. What I read is a huge piece, right?
It's a factor for sure.
It's a factor. I think part of that too is Northern Virginia. Now they've extended the metro line out even past Dulles Airport.
Yep.
So in theory, you don't necessarily have to drive all the way to Greenbelt if you're a bureau employee and you want to stay in Fairfax or Loudoun County, Virginia.
Yeah.
You can take the train all the way. It might take you a while, but you can get there.
Yeah.
And but here's an interesting. I won't mention his name, but I have a friend that. Bureau employee, and he mentioned something to me that was that I should have known, but it really was like aha moment when he was talking about just the struggle of bringing bureau people to Huntsville, to the campus here. And one thing that people have to really realize when an agency has established roots somewhere, like DC or Virginia or Maryland, over time, and then that city gets more and more expensive to live.
Yeah.
A lot of your employees, the people, the public, they may not actually own the house they're in. It might belong to like the family.
Sure.
And we're going to have this situation here, whereas Huntsville and Madison get more and more expensive.
Yeah.
And people have to spread out to Athens or beyond and commute in. It may be a huge family asset if Grandma actually moved here in 1973.
Yeah.
She may be long gone. The house stays in the family, and others get to benefit from living there.
100%.
And as you mentioned to me, I was like, you're right. I mean, you've got probably thousands of employees who fit into that. If you can live inside, if anybody knows what inside the Beltway means, well, your property value automatically is way, way high because you're inside the Beltway.
Yeah.
And if your family has a home inside the Beltway, you probably hold on to it.
Yeah.
right?
100%.
And so I think that's got to be a huge reason that they've never thought about, like, look, we can't leave the national capital region
Yeah.
and move headquarters somewhere else, because now you're having a hard enough time in a way, and contractors are on the same point, trying to get people to come to Huntsville, let alone your actual headquarters. And I'm sure that's stuff that was discussed back in 2015 when you were first part of the project.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so back then Huntsville wasn't really on the radar for the FBI, and so this was a big topic and a big point of contention for a lot of our employees, was this concept of, well, if you shift it one way or the other, my commute is going to be negatively impacted, and that could add 30 minutes of extra commute time to my day. It could add an extra hour and a half.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, for those that don't live in DC, that, you think about that, like, you could be commuting an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours every single day. Like, that's a significant portion of your day. But I think this time is going to be a little bit different. I think the conversations and the conflict will be a little bit less because of what's happened here with Huntsville. Because when we shifted away from, okay, we just don't have the political willpower right now, and we don't have the economics right now to do this new headquarters project, and all of a sudden we started talking about, hey, we're going to move a significant portion of our workforce to Huntsville.
Yeah.
Like, it had some people like doing 180s. They were like, wait, what? So now my commute isn't going to go from, an hour to an hour and a half. Now I may be 3 states away from where I am now.
Right.
So I think that adds some new perspective especially to our employees in the capital region. Is like, well, at least I am not getting relocated by states.
Yeah.
So I completely understand our workforce that's up there, that they've got established family. You've lived there for your whole life. Like, I completely understand how that can be a very difficult decision to make, of the position you're in is getting moved to Huntsville, Alabama, and you're just like, everything I know is up here. All of my family is up here. I don't necessarily have a problem with those folks saying, I need something else.
Yeah.
So we went through a period of time in the early days of Huntsville and getting it out there, of making sure that people really understood what the Huntsville community brought to the table, and all of the incredible value that comes from this space. And while it's not right for everybody, it's right for a lot of people. And so I think, for people not in the Bureau, I think there may have been this conception of, well, nobody in the FBI wanted to come to Huntsville, Alabama. And that was actually not the case at all. We came down and we lost a significant portion of our initial workforce because they were embeds to DC.
Yeah.
But we did not have a big challenge in backfilling many of those positions, because we have 56 field offices spread across the country, and we have over 300 resident agencies that are, satellites to those field offices. So we've got people all over the country, and all of them, well, not all of them, but many of them have to come back to headquarters as part of their career development and career advancement. And so for them, having an opportunity to get headquarters experience and time without having to go into the national capital region was a huge positive. So you've got a lot of agents and intelligence analysts that they have families. And so being able to come to a more family-friendly environment where your commute time isn't going to be outrageous, and you can get home to see your daughter or your son come home from school and go to their games after work, like, that was a huge positive. And so, where I think a lot of people kind of have that misconception is like, no, we're not having a super hard time filling a lot of our positions.
That's
like,
good.
We've got a lot of those folks. The challenge for us, I think, is going to come in the next couple of waves that we're bringing down from the DC area are going to be very highly technical and very highly specialized positions. These are folks that have been doing that work for 10, 15, 20 years. And so it's really hard to take somebody who has not done that before and bring them in and get them up to speed.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a real challenge for us in the next couple of years. But it's something that, we're thinking through. We're thinking through strategies of how do we retain that institutional knowledge? What does the change management arc look like to preserve the best elements of those cultures as we're bringing those down?
So then on the professional staff side, do you have assignments or can you stay as long as you want? Unless Does that, like, I guess with the special agents, there's more
Yeah.
of you having a 3-year, 5-year assignment.
Yeah, so for many of the special agents, especially when you start getting into some of the supervisory roles, they have what they call up and out policies, and so you can only stay in those positions for a certain period of time.
Right.
Now they do offer opportunities for what they call stepping down, and so you can step down into a lower GS grade position and still stay in that locality. But obviously, for those that want to continue to advance their career,
Yeah.
they're pretty mobile. They move around quite a lot. For our professional staff cadre, it's a lot more flexible. And so you've had professional staff folks that they've stayed in position for 20 plus years, doing much the same type of work. Now, I would say that's not necessarily for everybody. I encourage my folks to, whether it's taking temporary assignments, what we call TDYs, or you know,
A JDA? Do you have JDAs?
we do have joint duty assignments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where we send our folks over to other agencies to
Right.
kind of learn the work they do and help there. Those are all things that kind of help broaden your expertise. They broaden your perspective. And then you get to come back and you bring new skills and new knowledge that will further our efforts. So we absolutely kind of encourage folks to, while you may not want to move from the area you are, you certainly want to continue to grow as a professional and expand your experience level.
Yeah. So let's transition and talk about you, Brent, more
Yeah.
from, I think, professionally.
Sure.
You know, so outside of your job, and let me just let me bring up a thing. I like, these are just things I took from your posts.
Yeah.
And you can see it probably better on that top monitor.
Mm-hmm.
But talk me through a little bit about your brand.
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
what it is you want when people see this and they see, hey, Brent Yonk, and what is it the message you have for people and what you're about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, throughout my time, both in private sector and in the public sector, one of the challenges that I have recognized that it spans the breadth of pretty much every organization is I think that people, we kind of have a, what's the right way to, kind of tunnel vision when it comes to concepts like leadership.
Yeah.
And so for most people, when you talk about leadership, you almost always start to think of people in management roles, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, we're talking about leadership. Oh, we're talking about some bigwig, right? Some executive, somebody who's leading a team of people and making decisions like that. What we don't often do is we don't correlate leadership with what I'm doing, right? With your role, where you are right now. And so my big thing that I try to focus on helping people understand is leadership is it's not a title, and it's not a role-based thing. Mm-hmm. Leadership is absolutely a behavioral-based thing. It's something you get to choose to do regardless of what role you're in. And so my focus is on helping people really understand what leadership means, and then understand how can I start to apply that regardless of where I'm at in my professional career. And even further than that, I'm also trying to help people branch out and see that leadership is not limited to the professional realm. Leadership is a lifestyle skill. It's something that it cascades across every element of your life. And so as you're learning how to apply different types of leadership abilities in your work, like, you can take those same skills and abilities back to your home, and you can use them to benefit your children, your family, and your community. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that's one of the core focuses I have, is helping people recognize that you can absolutely be a leader no matter what position you're in. You can be a leader in every element and aspect of your life. And it just takes you kind of broadening your perspective and starting to have that self-awareness and that recognition that you can apply it there.
Real quick, is this something that was festering with you in the private sector, or has it really taken more shape just since coming to the Bureau?
Yeah, no, it was pre-Bureau as well. I was actually really excited joining the Bureau because the Bureau is known as the premier law enforcement agency in the world. Mm-hmm. And so the outside perception of that was like, oh man, these guys, they must have like the secret sauce. They must have the killer recipe on how to develop leaders. And while there are elements of that in the Bureau, it's certainly not a foregone conclusion that you're going to come into the FBI and you're just going to turn into a rock star leader. Yeah. So that's something that I've also been very focused on trying to help the FBI with. But no, I mean, my first real job, I was working for a company called Quest Communications.
Yeah.
They were required by Charter, or not Charter, they were required by CenturyLink. And when I was working there, there was a guy that was on my same team. We were both sales reps, and he had been there longer than I had. And there was a supervisor job that was coming open, and when it came open, you could tell like he was just really soured against it. He was like, "Oh, I don't want to become a supervisor." Like you start having to play politics, and then he just started talking about leadership in that same, like, oh, leadership it's just this soft stuff. It's all like snake oil and like that type of sentiment. And I was like, okay, clearly there's some issues here. We should probably talk a little bit more about this. But I started to see like people's perception of this was really impacting their decision making, and it was really impacting the way that they like made choices in their careers. And so I wanted to try to do what I could to kind of provide some clarity to like what is that leadership, and what does it mean, and what are those behaviors that are associated with it. Now, in the Bureau, one of the things that I have learned that is another issue that kind of falls very similar to this is there's a real a real difference between leadership and management.
Yeah.
And I don't think most organizations really do a good job of separating those two and being clear on those differences. And so Simon Sinek, he had a great saying where he would say, I know a lot of leaders, or I think he said, I know there's a lot of people with authority, people in positions of authority who are not leaders.
Sure.
And I know a lot of people who are not in positions of authority who are absolutely leaders. And that's 100% right. It helps you understand and distinguish the difference there, which is you can absolutely be in a supervisory or a management role. You can have people who report to you, and you can absolutely not be an effective leader.
Yep.
We would hope that you are, but if you have not spent the time and put in the effort, and frankly, if the organizations that you've worked for haven't given you the resources to develop it, you may be a really poor leader, even though you're in this management role.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Like, a lot of these organizations haven't done a great job of focusing in on the management elements of this, right? Management is important too. It's essential. You've got to understand how to acquire the resources you need, distribute those resources to the right place, how to make decisions in a timely manner so that the people that you lead can do their best work. And so my effort is like making sure that both people understand, what leadership is, how do I start to learn, apply all of that, and helping organizations understand what are those critical elements of management that you need to be focusing on as an organization in developing within your people. And then just trying to understand the difference of when do these different development phases, like when should we start focusing on these different skill sets?
Yeah.
So for me, the minute somebody steps within an organization, we should absolutely be having leadership development discussions with them. We should talk about what does it mean to be a leader within this organization? What are the skills that we expect from you? And what are the resources that we're going to provide to help you get there? So that by the time 5, 10 years down the road that we start talking to you about management roles, you're already well developed as a leader. You're ready to go from that front. And now you can focus your time and your attention on developing the management skills that are going to help make you successful in managing the resources that you'll need as part of those responsibilities. So a big lesson that we learned when I was in the private sector, we fell prey to, I think, something that a lot of organizations do, which is when we were promoting people, we were looking for who the top performer was. And you'd be like, oh, you're the top salesman on the team, so we need to promote you because then you'll be able to make all the other people top salesmen. And then when it didn't happen, and in fact, most of the time what would happen is those teams would perform even worse. We would go back and we'd be like, what's going on here, right? And you recognize that, okay, so a top salesperson has figured out how to use their unique skills and abilities to do the job they were given to the best of their talent. But if you never gave them the tools to lead others and you put them in a role over others, what are they going to do? They're going to fall back on what they know. Well, this is how I did it, so obviously that's how you all should do it. And that right there is the textbook definition of micromanagement.
Yeah.
So you have now just created a micromanager who's trying to force everybody on their team to do the job the exact same way they would do it if they were that person. And that just doesn't translate for human beings. We hate being micromanaged.
Yeah.
And so helping people understand when it comes to leading, it's not about telling people how to do the work. It's about setting the parameters and the vision, and then helping them find out what their unique skills, strengths, and abilities are, and how can they leverage those to help them get the work done. That's when you're really going to start to see the multiplying force of performance.
I know that you're what, class 37 with Leadership Huntsville?
Yeah.
And of course in your time in the bureau or even private sector, but what are some of the best examples that you could come up with as far as for leadership training? Because unfortunately at times I feel like it's somewhat genetic or it's just in your DNA, and sometimes it's just a matter of like, okay, am I passionate about this? And then you're really going to see everything come out.
Yeah.
But then I sometimes struggle with, okay, it's one thing to train a manager.
Sure.
It's very tactical.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
You're going to do this, you can do that. We have this tool, that tool. How do you train? How do you teach leadership?
Yeah. So it's kind of going back to that. Is it born or is it bred?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And while there are certainly elements of it that you may just naturally have, the development piece, I think, is the key. I think that's where real great leadership comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it comes from helping people recognize, what are you passionate about? And then how do I align those passions with the work that you have?
Right.
Right. So when you talk about the FBI, you come into the FBI, and the FBI is an organization that's it's brimming with purpose, right? I mean, you walk in the doors of J. Edgar Hoover, our headquarters, and the first thing that you're going to see on the wall is the mission statement, right? We protect the American people and we uphold the U.S. Constitution. And so that is something that helps people tap into a purpose. But you can absolutely still have people within our organization that they don't see the connection between the job they do and the mission statement on the wall. And if they don't see that connection, then they're going to be much more prone to stress, burnout, depression, all of those type of things. They're not going to recognize the value of the work that they do. A really cool experience that happened early in my time joining the Bureau, in kind of 2015 into 2016, there was the Oregon standoff that was happening over on the West Coast. And so we had our agents deployed on the front lines. They were surrounding that area. And they have all of these needs still, right? There's logistical needs, there's financial needs, they need vehicles, maintenance, all that type of stuff. And so one of the decisions that our leaders in the Finance and Facilities Division at headquarters made was they were going to forward deploy some of our professional staff members to actually be co-located on the front lines with our agents.
Okay.
And so we had people that they'd never been in the field before, and now they're going out, they're working in the rain, the mud, the sun, like all the same conditions that our agents are, but they're right there hearing the needs and directly supporting them on the front line. And then once that was resolved and they came back, we held an all hands within the division for those folks to share their experiences back with the rest of our members, and you could feel it, like they were on fire. Now these are people that usually they're sitting behind desks, they're looking at spreadsheets, they're it's not the most glorious work in the world. They're not running around with guns and stuff, but from that experience, from that opportunity of being so closely connected with the mission, like they were all in, and you could just there was a different level of commitment, a different level of energy. And so finding ways both personally as an individual to try to make those connections where you can get yourself a little bit closer to the outputs of what your work contributes to. And then as an organization, looking for ways to help your people make those type of connections, it can do incredible things when it comes to motivation and the engagement of the workforce. So when I train people around leadership, my goal is to help that, like, understand what is the work that they're doing and how does that work support the greater purpose, mission, objective of the team or whatever they're working with. And just trying to find ways to help them see that connection. Yeah. Right. And then try to help them understand, what is it that you bring to the table? What are the skills and the abilities that you have, whether inherently or developed, that you can leverage and apply towards that area? And it may not be something that's initially in your job description. Like you may be an accountant and you just like you're passionate about like visual information, right? There's absolutely opportunities for you to take initiative and apply that passion into the job that you have. And now not only are you getting better at the thing you like to do,
Yeah.
but you're also adding this new contribution to the mission. So looking for those opportunities. When you find those opportunities to connect those dots and to apply the things that you're really passionate about to the work that you're doing, I mean, you start to experience a level of engagement that you probably never had before. And so the FBI, I think, does a super good job at giving people the latitude to really kind of bring their whole self to the work and to apply their broad and diverse skills to the type of work that they do. So we don't necessarily paint you into, a box and don't let you kind of use what makes you special to move the work.
This picture right here, and this was at AFROTECH.
Yeah.
And I think this is indicative. This is my comment here is not going to be about AFROTECH, but it's just a good leader. Here you are, right? You've been charged to go out to Austin. It was Austin, right?
Austin, yep.
Which is, I saw something in the paper. It's like the new California.
Yes.
I think Rogan's led this exodus from California, and everyone wants to be in Austin, Texas.
Rogan and Elon Musk, yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
But to me, that's this. If you really want to empower people and have like the Brent Yonks of the world enjoy their job more, it's just being with that charge of, hey, you go to Austin, you represent the Bureau. Good luck. We trust you.
Yeah.
And that's like the best thing when you get in it. Okay, this is an assignment. Yes, you go on like a TDY for the week. You go to a conference. But anytime you can instill that level of confidence in someone and you show them like, hey, I'm not micromanaging you.
Yeah.
Teach correct principles, let them govern themselves, right?
Absolutely.
You get more out of them.
Yes.
Like you come back recharged because you're like, hey, I just represented the FBI at this thing.
Yep.
Initiated 50 contingent offers. I did a good job.
Yeah.
Right. And return a report.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so it was a great experience. And especially with a conference like this, right? The people that were showing up at this event, they were expecting a certain demographic from all the organizations that showed up. And so when they see the FBI show up, and it's a diverse group. I mean, we had people from all ethnic backgrounds. We had people from all different experience levels that were there, from somebody who was in a senior leadership role like myself all the way to we had interns who were also there representing. And so people get to see like the full kind of scope of the FBI. And when they hear all of us kind of sharing the same message and the same themes, it really helps drive it home, and it really helps it be, be more sincere and authentic. So, and then of course, I love these type of events. I love to really share the opportunities that people can have. And when you come back, and I get LinkedIn messages all the time from folks that are like, hey, that was great. I have some follow-up questions, or hey, I just want to let you know I'm applying for this position. Yeah. Like it's awesome.
You made me think of when I was, when you're in the contracting world, right? We're there and we're on site with our government client, right? Yep. So you have contractors.
100%.
And there's always this challenge of we're kind of working with your support corporate folks who are not cleared.
Yes.
And there was at one time, and there's always going to be somewhat of an opposition because your direct labor people, well, I'm the one who's producing all the revenue, paying for all these people sitting back at corporate, right? And it never goes away. It's just this age-old battle.
Yeah.
And every now and then, we would have some, we would just have some issues, and with recruiting or just HR or security. And I was like, you know what? And there's always, and we were kind of talking earlier too about kind of the veil of secrecy around when you're in the Intel or DOJ.
Yeah.
And it was clear to me. I was like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's invite everybody that supports us to come to a meeting at our customer site. And we had our customer was cool with that. We're now just kind of a public area, but let's let them have a day in the life so they can now appreciate what it's like to be one of us.
Yeah.
And it was literally from, you're going to go in like everybody else. You're going to get a red badge. You're going to get on the shuttle. You're going to come to our building. Just like so as a recruiter, this is what the applicants go through.
Yes.
So everybody you talk to on the phone, this is the instruction. Now we want you to live it. And then they show up into this, otherwise it had always been this veil of secrecy around these sites.
Yeah.
And like, oh, you can come here.
Yep.
Now, you can only go so far, but it's like family day, right? Come on in.
Yep.
And then, here's our food court, and like, wow. And then, man, from then on, then you had a real team.
Yes.
Like let's come together. Let's not, sometimes you have to have that physical manifestation, if you will, of team.
Yes.
And the virtual thing is great, and you can handle email, that's all. But every now and then you have to bring them together. And it was really cool that you come on to our super secret compound.
Yeah.
And be with our people and get a feel for what it's like to be them.
Absolutely.
And man, it just changed everything.
Yeah. Helping people kind of jump from the conceptual idea to actually being able to experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's big.